On the afternoon of January the 4th, 2023, police officers in Enoch, Utah, approached a red brick house on North Albert Street for what they believed would be a routine welfare check. What they found inside would shatter a community and expose a devastating truth about the hidden face of domestic violence. 8 bodies lay within the walls of what neighbors had always seen as the home of a picture-perfect Mormon family. Among the dead were 5 innocent children, the youngest just 4 years old. This is the story of the Haight family massacre, a tragedy that was years in the making, warned about by those who couldn't be heard and executed with chilling calculation. If you want to follow this case and other true crime stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature, please subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss any updates. The Haight family tragedy stands as one of the most devastating familicide cases in recent Utah history. On that cold January day in 2023, law enforcement discovered the bodies of Tasha Haight, aged 40, her mother, Gail Earl, aged 78, and 5 children, 17-year-old Macie, 12-year-old Briley, 7-year-old twins, Sienna and Ammon, and 4-year-old Gavin. The person responsible for this unspeakable act was Michael Haight, aged 42, Tasha's husband and the children's father, who took his own life after killing his family. This channel is dedicated to examining real cases with factual accuracy and respect for victims. If you're interested in understanding the warning signs of domestic violence and how tragedies like this might be prevented, please subscribe and join our community. To understand what happened on North Albert Street, we must first understand who the Haight's appeared to be. Michael Haight worked as an insurance agent, a profession that required him to present a trustworthy, stable image to clients. Tasha Haight was a devoted mother who dedicated her life to raising their 5 children. The family were active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, regularly attending services and community events. Their social media presence painted a portrait of domestic bliss, smiling faces on family vacations, children participating in school activities, holiday celebrations, and expressions of faith and gratitude. To neighbors and acquaintances, they seemed to embody the ideal of a close-knit religious family. But behind the carefully curated facade, a different reality existed. According to later accounts from those close to Tasha, Michael exercised extreme control over his wife's daily life. He monitored her communications, confiscating her iPad and cell phone to isolate her from friends and family. Tasha reportedly felt trapped in her marriage, unable to make decisions without Michael's approval. The psychological control extended to financial matters, with Michael maintaining tight oversight of household resources. Friends would later describe how Tasha seemed to be walking on eggshells, always careful about what she said and did. The breaking point came on December 21, 2022, when Tasha filed for divorce. This single act of defiance against years of control would set in motion a countdown to tragedy. Court documents from the divorce filing would later reveal the depth of the dysfunction in the marriage. For Michael Haight, who saw his family as possessions rather than people, the divorce represented an unacceptable loss of control. What Tasha hoped would be the beginning of freedom would instead become the catalyst for unspeakable violence. In the days following the divorce filing, Tasha confided a chilling detail to people close to her. Michael had removed all the firearms from the house guns that both Tasha and her mother Gail had been trained to use for self-defense. For Tasha, the removal of these weapons wasn't just about disarmament. It was a symbolic and literal stripping away of her ability to protect herself and her children. She told confidants that she felt completely vulnerable and abandoned, expressing deep fear about what might come next. These concerns tragically would prove to be well-founded. The warning signs of Michael Haight's capacity for violence had actually emerged years earlier, but the system designed to protect vulnerable family members had failed catastrophically. In 2020, 3 years before the massacre, 14-year-old Macie Haight had taken the brave step of reporting her father to police. The details she provided were disturbing and specific. Macie told investigators that her father had choked her, and slammed her head into a couch during an altercation. The physical violence was frightening enough, but what Macie said next should have sent alarm bells ringing through every level of law enforcement. According to the police report from that 2020 incident, Macie explicitly told investigators that she feared her father would one day kill her. She stated clearly in words that would later seem prophetic that she was afraid he would choke her to death. This wasn't a vague concern or teenage exaggeration. This was a specific, credible threat assessment from someone who knew Michael Haight's violent tendencies firsthand. The detective who took Macie's statement documented everything properly. The case was investigated. Physical evidence was collected. Witness statements were recorded. But then, inexplicably, the case stalled. The police file was never forwarded to the Washington County Attorney's Office for potential prosecution. No charges were ever filed against Michael Haight. Instead, he received what can only be described as a slap on the wrist, a verbal warning from police, and a suggestion that he should consider attending anger management counseling or therapy. There was no court order, no mandatory intervention, no follow-up to ensure the safety of Macie and her siblings. The case was simply closed, and the Haight children were left to continue living with a man who had already demonstrated he was capable of violence against them. The failure of this moment cannot be overstated. A 14-year-old girl had done everything right, had found the courage to report abuse, had articulated her fear of being killed, and the system had let her down completely. As the divorce proceedings moved forward in late December 2022 and early January 2023, Michael Haight began making preparations that revealed the true calculating nature of what was to come. Law enforcement would later examine Michael's Google search history and discover a pattern of research that demonstrated clear premeditation. This was not a crime of passion or a moment of emotional breakdown. This was methodically planned murder. Michael's search queries included chilling questions that revealed his thought process. He searched for information about whether neighbors could hear gunshots from inside a house, clearly concerned about whether his actions would be interrupted before he could complete them. He researched the lethality of different firearms and ammunition types, seeking to ensure that there would be no survivors who could call for help or serve as witnesses. He looked up information about familicide cases in other states, studying how other family annihilators had carried out their crimes and how police had responded. He even searched for details about welfare checks and how long it typically took for police to respond to missed appointments or concerns from friends. The digital evidence painted a picture of a man who understood exactly what he was planning to do and who wanted to execute it with maximum efficiency. Michael wasn't losing control. He was asserting the ultimate form of control, deciding that if he couldn't have his family on his terms, no one would have them at all. This possessive mindset, viewing his wife and children as objects he owned rather than people with their own autonomy, is a common thread in familicide cases. When that sense of ownership is threatened, as it was by Tasha's divorce filing, the response can be lethal. The evening of January 3, 2023, appeared ordinary to those who saw Tasha and Macie at a church event. Mother and daughter attended together, smiling and socializing with other members of their congregation. There was no outward sign of the terror that may have been building in their home. No one who saw them that night could have imagined that within hours the entire Haight family would be dead. When Tasha and Macie returned home that evening, they walked through the front door into what would become a death trap. The exact sequence of events inside the house that night will never be fully known, but the evidence collected by investigators allows for a reconstruction based on ballistics autopsy findings and the positions where bodies were discovered. What is clear is that Michael Haight methodically shot and killed each member of his family. Tasha Haight, who had dared to file for divorce, was killed. Gail Earle, who had likely supported her daughter's decision to leave and who had weapons training that might have allowed her to defend the family, was killed. And then, most horrifically, the children. 17-year-old Macie, who 3 years earlier had told police her father would kill her, was killed. 12-year-old Briley, who had years of childhood still ahead, was killed. 7-year-old twins Sienna and Ammon, who were just beginning to understand the world around them, were killed. And 4-year-old Gavin, a preschooler who should have been worried about nothing more serious than his favorite toys and bedtime stories, was killed. Not one of the neighbors in the quiet Enoch neighborhood heard gunshots that night. Not one person called 911 to report screaming or sounds of distress. The house on North Albert Street held its terrible secret until the next afternoon. When police entered the home on January 4th, responding to the welfare check request after Tasha missed an important appointment, they found a scene of unimaginable devastation. 8 bodies throughout the residence, arranged in a way that suggested they had been killed in different rooms, possibly as they tried to flee or hide. Michael Haight had taken his own life after killing his family, leaving behind no note, no explanation. Nothing that might help others understand how things had reached this point. The investigation that followed would be thorough, but in many ways the most important questions had answers that had been available for years, waiting in a police file that was never pursued. The community response to the tragedy was immediate and overwhelming. More than 800 people attended the funeral services for the Haight family members. Enoch, a small city with a population of under 8,000, was traumatized by the loss. The local school district brought in counselors to help students process the deaths of their classmates. The church congregation where the Haight's had been active members struggled to reconcile the image of the family they thought they knew with the horror of what had happened. Vigils were held, memorials were created, and an entire community asked itself how such a thing could have occurred in their midst. But beyond the grief and shock, there were angry questions that demanded answers. Why had Macie's 2020 report of violence not been taken more seriously? Why was the case not forwarded to prosecutors? What kind of system allows a child to report that her father is going to kill her and then does nothing to remove her from that situation? The Enoch Police Department faced intense scrutiny over their handling of the 2020 case. The police chief acknowledged that procedures had not been followed correctly, but maintained that even if charges had been filed, it was unlikely Michael would have faced serious consequences for a first-time domestic violence offense. This response, while perhaps legally accurate, missed the larger point. The goal wasn't necessarily to put Michael Haight in prison in 2020. The goal was to create a documented history of violent behavior, to order intervention and monitoring, to establish a pattern that would make it harder for him to obtain firearms later, and most importantly to send a clear message to Michael and his family that violence would not be tolerated or ignored. None of that happened. The case was closed with a verbal warning, and the opportunity to potentially prevent a massacre was lost. The investigation into the murders themselves was relatively straightforward from a forensic standpoint. Ballistics analysis confirmed that all family members died from gunshot wounds inflicted by firearms registered to Michael Haight. Autopsies established approximate times of death in the late evening of January 3rd or early morning of January 4th. The Google search history provided clear evidence of premeditation. Michael's financial records showed that he had recently withdrawn large sums of cash, possibly to make it harder for Tasha to access marital assets during the divorce. Everything pointed to a man who had made a deliberate decision to annihilate his family rather than accept divorce. The case was officially closed with the determination that Michael Haight had committed murder-suicide, killing his wife, mother-in-law, 5 children, and then himself. There would be no trial, no day in court where the evidence could be presented and justice formally served. The only accountability would come through public awareness and hopefully systemic changes to prevent similar tragedies. Because while the Haight case is closed, the issues it exposed about domestic violence, the danger period around separation and divorce, and the failures of intervention systems remain very much open. The Haight family massacre offers several critical lessons that extend far beyond one family's tragedy. First, the period when a victim is attempting to leave an abusive relationship is statistically the most dangerous time. Studies show that the risk of intimate partner homicide increases dramatically when an abuser faces loss of control through separation or divorce. Tasha Haight's decision to file for divorce, while absolutely the right choice for her and her children's long-term well-being, required a level of safety planning and protection that she ultimately did not receive. Second, when children report violence in the home, those reports must be taken seriously and pursued with full legal force. Macie Haight's courage in coming forward in 2020 should have been met with an equally courageous response from the system meant to protect her. As we reflect on this tragedy, we remember Tasha Haight, a mother who was trying to protect her children by leaving an abusive marriage. We remember Gail Earle, a grandmother who supported her daughter through an impossible situation. We remember Macie Briley Sienna Ammon and Gavin, 5 children, who deserved to grow up, to go to college, to fall in love, to have children of their own, to live full and happy lives. They were not statistics. They were not just victims. They were real people with hopes and dreams and futures that were stolen from them. Their story must not be forgotten, because remembering them means learning from what happened and working to ensure no other family suffers the same fate. In a society that values law and order, the Haight tragedy reminds us that justice requires vigilance at every level, from the initial report to the final resolution. When we allow warnings to go unheeded and victims to fall through the cracks, we fail in our most basic duty to protect the vulnerable. No system can prevent every tragedy, but every system can and must do better than what happened in Enoch, Utah. We invite you to share your thoughts on this case in the comments below, always remembering to base your discussion on the facts presented. If these stories matter to you, if you believe in learning from tragedy to prevent future ones, please subscribe to our channel for more true crime cases that reveal both the darkness humans are capable of and the light we must shine to combat it. Thank you for watching, and may the Haight family rest in peace.